Okay, welcome to Chapter 3. Now, Chapter 3 is all about plans, information security management, but we're talking about the things you have to do because this course is really about plans. Okay, so learning objectives, we're talking about, the management functions that are involved, the elements of a plan, explain what all they're supposed to do, and then explain blueprints because, you're not the first person to come up and having to produce a security plan. So there's an awful lot of examples out there. Okay. So the opening case is pretty cool, like a monthly abuse report kind of a thing. Read that. It'll take just a second. On page 82, they talk about, the introduction to the thing is often called InfoSec management, information security management, InfoSec, kind of cool. And so the all information security programs start with policies, standards, and practices. Yeah, I mean, these are three separate things, and you need to kind of get your head around them because this is kind of sort of important. So creating these documents, the policy, standards, and practices, basically requires an awful lot of planning and maybe some, some expertise and some experience. So we have IT operations, the normal stuff that people do, like creating accounts and unblocking stuff and fixing someone's password, all that stuff. That's different than InfoSec operations. InfoSec operations is all about, setting up security and setting up firewalls and, partitioning things so people in this organization don't have access to stuff over there and vice versa. And so often they're in conflicts because the IT folks just want to get things done, okay? Somebody calls up and says, I need access to this. Can you help me? They think their job is to get them access, where the InfoSec person would say, wait, why do you need access? So they're really two different things here. So the 6 P's for this is, planning, policy, programs, protection, people, and project management. I think it's kind of cool. So we're going to go through each one of those one at a time. So planning. So it requires input from participating people, maybe the entire organization. So when you get ready to do something, for example, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be building a building, building a bridge, or doing an InfoSec security policy. You really need to talk to people and find out what the heck's going on. Because if you don't know what the problem is, then practically any solution will work. So you have to translate what the business requirements are, because if you talk to the business people, the sales manager, and say, what data do you collect and how do you use it? They're not going to be thinking, access control lists and permissions, right? That's not their job. So you need to translate their business strategy into InfoSec strategy. Otherwise, if you don't do that, then somebody's going to come back one day and say, why are you doing this? It's like, but here's the reason why. Okay, so it's kind of an important step. The policy, there's basically 3 different types of policies that you would run across. Enterprise policy is rather generic and it's set for the whole organization. And it talks about, we think security is important and we need to have strong passwords, those kind of just broad brush kind of things. And, don't do, bad things on the internet. An issue-specific policy is about a particular thing, like can I use the Xerox machine? Can I use email? That kind of stuff. And then system-specific is about, okay, in this particular software package or this suite of packages or this, ERP or whatever it is, it's like the configuration of the software and what your roles and responsibilities are. Okay, keeping up, programs. So these are ongoing activities. This is like day-to-day kind of operations. So an example might be the Security Education Training and Awareness Program, SETA. We're going to be talking an awful lot about this kind of stuff coming up. But basically, yes, you're going to have a program where you, at least annually, make sure people are completely aware of all the security requirements. At the university, as an employee, I have an annual requirement for me to go take their InfoSec security class every single year. That they're not even aware that I teach the course on this topic, but I still have to take the dang exam. Okay. So a risk management program, that kind of stuff. So that's where the programs come in. From the protection point of view, so we're talking about mostly about controls. So like I have a control on a firewall. I have management controls. I have tools that I can use. I can have access control lists to determine who has access to a particular piece of data, that kind of stuff. The controls could be, a lot of technology related things like an intrusion detection system and things of that nature, and firewall rules and all that. People, of course, I still think that people are the most critical link to this thing, because you could have an absolutely perfect setup to prevent from outsiders from penetrating your system and wreaking havoc. And then you have a disgruntled employee who already has access to the data because of some legitimate business need, and they go rogue, and it's practically impossible to stop this from the inside. So yeah, that's a lot of problem. So security personnel themselves, that's where the people would be, right? I have to train up my people, okay? The protection of employees, right? Again, the setup program, making sure they know, don't click on email attachments, stuff you've heard 1,000 times. But it has to basically be in writing, and it has to be reinforced at least annually. Project, the last one. Okay, so I'm getting ready to roll out a new software package or a new application that's either developed in-house or I bought it, whatever. It's all about project management. You can't, how are you going to phase in? Are you going to overlap? There's lots of choices for how you can implement a new system. And so that's all that. By the way, we teach a 4341, project management course. Pretty doggone good course. Okay, on page 84, they talk about planning and governance. So a strategic plan is long-term, and some businesses long-term is like 2 or 3 years. Others, it's 4 or 5 years. It kind of just depends on what business you're in. Based upon some common goal. For example, business might come in and say, I want to gain 20% of market share in the next 2 years. That's a legitimate, honest-to-God, management goal, okay? And so now it's your job to figure out how to make that happen, how to implement that goal. All right. So it could be the individual objectives are based upon, every time you come up with some project or objective, it's based upon that common goal at the top. Okay, leadership and governance, page 84. It's called this, governance, risk management, and compliance, GRC. That's a cool name for it. And governance basically answers, back before we were talking about what answers the question, why are you doing this? Okay, now we have another one. This answers the question, who gave you the right to control my access to the internet? Okay, so again, this could be a high-level, branch manager, vice president, and they can't go to their favorite porn site. Okay, I'm using it as an example. Forgive me. And they're pissed at the security people. So somebody has to have their back. The CEO or the CISO, has to be able to say, no, that's legit. You leave them guys alone. So let's talk about the governance of how the university. Now, this is from the big TAMU in the sky, not our particular organization. So they have an executive council, and then a CIO and strategic chairs meet. So they have an executive section and a leadership section, and then a strategic, enterprise services and security policy committee, technology committee, and then we get into the actual organizations, the surveillance, and IT policy and collaboration, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So here's how the people tap into that. The faculty senate and the student government organizations can get into here, and the IT security. Yes, we have meetings about once a month about IT related governance issues, and I'm invited to those meetings. I rarely go. Shh, don't tell anyone. And then university risk management. So it's all legit. By the way, having InfoSec as a subordinate part to the IT department is a really, really bad idea. Again, you need to be able to say you need to be on the same level, the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, basically be able to say, I'm the one who told him to do this, so you better dang comply, okay? Not because the IT folks are trying to make problems go away. A person came in and said they don't have access to the sensitive data, so My job is to fix it so they'll go away and I can work on some other project. That's not what InfoSec's problem is. InfoSec's problem is, tell me why you need access to this. Oh, well, Sally has access. I said, no. Just because some other person has access doesn't mean you need access, okay? So again, you can't have them work subordinated to each other, otherwise it'll just cause problems. Okay, some activities. You're probably going to have an at least annual, InfoSec evaluation, risk management, implementing policies, develop some sort of a management structure for developing the plans, conduct periodic tests. I remember one of the first ones that we got at when I was working at Fort Hood. It was a security questionnaire, and the first question that popped up is, enter your password, and it was like, no, and it said congratulations. They were trying to trick you into thinking that we were going to be asking for their password. It's like, no, that's not happening. Okay, so there's a particular phrase that I like to use a lot, other than ignorance and apathy. Another one I liked a lot is due care and due diligence. So let me pop on over here. So due care is the level of stuff you'd expect a reasonable person to do on a daily basis. That's what due care is, okay? Due diligence is a little bit further. So in the information security world, this is how it would normally happen. Let's say it was like a court case. So, did you create a security policy to cover this scenario? And I say, yes. And they said, okay. And so did you implement the controls? Yes, I did. And did you verify that the controls actually work? And you go, well, I just kind of assumed that everyone was complying. I mean, I sent it out to them and, annually, and I just assumed, they were following the rules. Wow. So due diligence is a higher level. It's basically talking about, let's go through the plans, let's go through all the stuff, and let's verify that the controls you put in place actually work. So due diligence is daily kind of stuff. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Due care is kind of daily kind of stuff, and then due diligence is a higher standard. I like questions like this on the quiz, by the way. Okay, so 2 parts. One is, I know what needs to be done and I did it. The other standard is, I verified that it worked. Okay, so let me get back to this. All right, so here's basically how governance would probably work. This happens to be an ISO standard, but you don't have to deal with that. So you have some sort of executive management, InfoSec, we saw that. And, some sort of a governing body that, that evaluates and monitors and communicates and assures. This is the assurance part. Remember, we talked about that in the due diligence part. I need to be assured that this stuff works. Okay. So the ISO standard for evaluating, directing, monitoring, communicating, and assuring. Those are the things you have to do. So here's the governance responsibilities. Now, this is very similar to the one we just saw from the Texas A&M University system. So overall corporate security and briefing the board, and here's where those people fit in. There's some overlaps. So the CEO is supposed to do the overall thing. And then the security officer or the information officer, risk, et cetera, they do these things. And then mid-level managers also implement, audit, enforce, and assess compliance and communicate policies program. And then down here, the staff, they're the ones that implement the policy, report problems, et cetera. So that's all. And so each person has a role in this, and they all have to kind of keep them separate. Hey, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark. This looks like a good place to stop.